myself briefly as Deborah Malmud. I am the publishing director at Norton Professional Books and the director of the Norton Professional Books imprint, which is the publisher of this collection edited by Ken Hardy. And I am very honored to be his editor and to have worked with him on this. I was looking back at my email exchange for the origin of when I found out about this project, and it was almost 2 years ago today, June 23rd, 2020, that he emailed me about it. And I'll tell you, for those of you who aren't familiar with book publishing, 2 years time from me hearing about such a big, important edited collection as this to holding this book in my hand, not to mention during severe supply chain and materials shortages, is just incredible. And it's a real testament to Ken, because when he emailed me, I was immediately drawn in by the topic and excited about the topic, but I also thought to myself as an editor, this sounds like it's going to take years. And indeed, he was so far along the way already with the project that it was amazing. And the ability that he had to find the people, to organize the topics, and to really present a cohesive, major achievement in publishing, in writing, and thinking is just, it's beyond. I don't have words to really explain it, except I can tell you that as a book editor for 22 years, I've published and edited 600 or 700 books. I've lost track. This is truly one of the most miraculous achievements in terms of just organizationally, forgetting the content. And then when you add on the importance of the content, it's really an outstanding publication in my own personal history and a great contribution to readers everywhere. As to Ken, I think most of us know him, but I will say that he is the clinical and organizational consultant at the Eichenberg Institute for Relationships in New York City and the Eichenberg Academy for Social Justice, and the director as such. He provides racially focused trauma-informed training, executive coaching, and consultation throughout the United States and abroad. And I'll add, just from his past, as I was looking over his CV, not surprisingly, he was a Teacher of the Year at Syracuse University 1 year, that if you know him, you could see that so easily. He's been honored by the American Academy of Family Therapy, the Marriage and Family Therapy Training Association, and many other professional organizations for his work in all sorts of areas, and has been a contributor both in large and small, and by large and small, I mean professional smaller audiences and wider, more popular audiences in writing, as well as other media, and has been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Dateline NBC in 2020. And as I said at the outset, I'm so honored to be his editor, to have worked with him on this, and to be working with him on something else that is equally as important. And so thank you, Ken, for everything. And it's been great working with you. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Deborah. I really appreciate your kind words. And, you know, I emailed you yesterday wanting you to be very much a part of this in a very visible way, because honestly, I can't think of a more wonderful partner to take on a task like this. And I've said this to you a number of times in emails privately. I just really appreciate your sense of industry and the ways in which you're so incredibly collaborative. And some of the folks in this platform know that there was a small piece of trepidation I had about this topic, because I realized it would probably more than likely require me to go to a white publishing firm and work with a white editor to do it, which I was really worried would have some ambivalence about the topic. And it was so wonderful because you gave me the green light from on and never hesitated, was very encouraging and supportive. So thank you. I really appreciate you as a human being, let alone as a wonderful editor. Welcome everyone. And I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you, the contributors, and to recognize that I've been looking forward to the day, and yet, as I said in the meeting earlier, it's a rather, in some ways, somber day, and just want to hold that out in front of us as well. And it's not lost to me that while all of you contributed quite substantively and significantly to the book, that many of you don't know each other. And so I thought maybe a good way to get started was to just do brief introductions. If I go around and just ask you if you'd be kind enough, introduce yourself, whatever you want to say about yourself that's important to say, that would be fine. Would like you to sort of just share your preferred pronouns as well, just to keep that out in front of us. So it doesn't matter where we start. Who would like to go first? Just love for you to introduce yourself.
Maybe you should call on us, Ken.
Deborah, Jodie, thanks for your willingness to go first.
Oh, that's not what I said, but okay. I'm Jodie Kliman, and I know about a quarter of the people here, and I've read about 2/3 of the book so far, which is just so powerful. And my kudos to Ken and to Deborah and to Norton, to Eichenberg, Dara. I am in professional transition. Let me locate myself first. I'm white, I'm Jewish, heterosexual. My pronouns are she and her. I'm in a multiracial family, which has had a big impact on my racial understanding. And professionally, I am in the process of leaving William James College, where I've been teaching in the doctoral program in psychology for like 32 out of the last 38 years. And I'm going to Boston Medical Center, which has the Center for Multicultural Training in Psychology, where Ken, you have given a marvelous talk, and I'll be teaching interns, psych interns and postdocs there.
Thanks, Jodie, and welcome. Thanks for getting us started. Irene, would you like to go next?
That's my plan.
Sure. My name is Irene Sung. I am Korean American, born and raised in the Midwest. I am a mother of 2 now adult kids, who are no longer kids, actually. They would not like me calling them kids. I'm a child psychiatrist by training and spent most of my professional life in the Department of Public Health in San Francisco.
Thanks, Elaine.
And my pronouns are she, her. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. And Hinda?
My name is Hinda Winawer. I'm a straight, cisgendered, white Jew, descended, who were born and raised in Brooklyn. That's Brooklyn, New York. And of immigrant parents, cisgendered, a she, my pronoun is she. I'm a parent of straight and LGBTQ plus kids. And I'm in a multi-religious and multiracial nuclear family. Professionally, everything I say professionally is almost in the past tense, almost everything. I'm currently director of Princeton Family Institute, which is consulting and therapy. I'm a clinical teacher, former executive director of the Center for Family, Community, and Social Justice, which was a great labor of love for 20 years until the Christie administration destroyed it. And then I'm faculty emerita of the Ackerman Institute and past president of the American Family Therapy Academy. And I'm happy to meet everybody. And thank you, Ken, for this book. And thank you, everybody, for being part of it. I've been reading it, but I'm a slow reader, and it is so moving that I take a long time to get through what I've been reading. I stop almost at every page.
Thank you. Thanks, Hinda. Welcome. Tim?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you all today. My name's Tim Baima. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, private practice here, and a professor at Palo Alto University. I'm also a straight cis man, white, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I've really been enjoying reading all of your work. I know that it's not something I'll read just once. I'm going to come back to it and read these chapters again and again. They've already been really important to me. I appreciate you all.
Thanks, Tim, and welcome. Anna?
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Me alegra que estamos aquí juntos. Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here with everyone. I am Dr. Anna Hernandez. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I identify as a Black Dominican, and I go by my pronouns hers, she. I am originally from Bronx, New York, born and raised. And I'm glad to be here with everyone.
Thanks, Anna. Great. Ovita,
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ken.
how you doing?
Thank you first and foremost for inviting me to this illustrious group. My pronouns are she, her. My name Ovita Williams. I was born in Guyana, South America. I came here when I was 5. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I'm a Brooklynite. I'm a cisgender woman, bisexual, mom of an adult child, an auntie, a sister, a daughter, a social worker. I teach at Columbia School of Social Work, and I run the Action Lab for Social Justice at Columbia, where I get to mentor some of the most amazing students that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last 18 years. So I'm really excited for this book and our conversation today. Thank you.
And I'm excited that you would actually agree to do this after I mistakenly referred to you as Jamaican and 3 pages into the book. So my public humble apologies to you, and I appreciate so much your grace.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Jean?
Good afternoon and good morning to some of you. Thank you. My name is Gene Cash. I am the owner and director of Counseling Alliance of Virginia. And my pronouns are he and him. And I am just truly honored to be a part of this group. Ken and I have been working in Richmond, Virginia, and Charlottesville, Virginia for the past 5 years together, trying to heal that community. And it has been a very daunting task, but a very rewarding and glorious time. He has been mentoring our staff to help me become more racially aware, racially sensitive, and truly try to interrupt and deconstruct white supremacy. In this book, and I wasn't going to tell you this, Ken, but I don't know if this is professional, but
Then it means it's appropriate.
you know what I'm saying? It was like the 10 crack commandments, Biggie, and I was like, that first chapter was phenomenal. And I'm like Hindi, I'm a slow reader, but I love everything I'm reading about it. But if you read this book, you have a path to true healing and interrupting what America's been struggling with to do for years. So I'm honored to be a part of this group, and thank you, and I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of this.
Pleasure. Thanks, Gene. Jeff?
I'm Jeff Mangram, he, him, his. I'm an associate professor at Syracuse University in the School of Education. And Ken, congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Liang-Ying?
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liang-Ying Chou, and currently I'm in Taiwan, and I'm born and raised here. I am an Asian American individual, and again, like I said, coming from Taiwan, cisgendered female. My pronouns is she and her. I'm a family therapist doing private practice in the state of New York and California. Formerly core faculty at Alliance International University, and now doing adjunct at Alliance and some other institution. I just cannot, I think I still love working in the academia and also doing my private practice, and both of that give me a lot of inspiration. Like many people to today, although it's 4 o'clock in the morning here, it's a truly an honor for me. I couldn't sleep the whole night last night. I'm just like excited, waiting for this conversation and meeting. I just cannot wait to hear everybody's story. It's really an honor right now, just seeing the room full of people coming from different walks of life, and then just I'm honored to be here, and thank you, Ken, and congratulations to you and to all of us.
Thank you, and thanks for your willingness to do this at such an ungodly hour of the morning. And I want to add here, just and you all know this, but the 10 of you really represent probably a little bit more than a third of the contributors. So we have lots of other partners who are joining us, hopefully by video, but it couldn't be here today just because of limitation of time. Mike?
Mike Boucher calling in from Seneca Territory in upstate New York, called Rochester, and pronouns are he, him, cis, straight, white male, married 30 years, 2 grown children, and I work as a clinician and community worker in a small nonprofit here in Rochester, serving people who don't have insurance or people who are underinsured or can't access care the way they need to. Just really grateful to be with this group. The words, and Ken, thanks for both the opportunity to be here on this call, but also to be part of this endeavor, the book itself. I've used words, it's like riveting, and I just each chapter is really amazing, and also need to take it really slow because of the depth of everybody's story and what's being said there. So it's really an amazing contribution that I appreciate everyone for.
Thanks, Mike. So, I think, so my hope here for this time is that that we will have a conversation, and I have some questions, or at least a question for each of you specifically, but also some that I'd like to just toss out for anyone just to sort of chime in as you see fit. As I was thinking about today, I was thinking there's actually a tad of irony involved in all of this, because as many of you well know, that when we were pulling these ideas together, it was against the backdrop of George Floyd having been murdered, and Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and the stories continue. And so it's a little bit ironic that we would come together today, and this date was planned some time ago, with Buffalo in the background. And so I wanted to, before delving into the specifics of the book, although in my way of thinking about the world, that what we're grappling with now in the aftermath of Buffalo is very germane to everything that most of us wrote about in the book. And so before getting into the book, I just wanted to just toss out any thoughts or reflections that any of you have about Buffalo. And I'm particularly thinking about you, Jeff, because you're right down the road from Buffalo, and Keith Alford is a part of this, who was actually in Buffalo, but not here. And I suspect that maybe the events here may have had something to do with it. But just wanted any thoughts, reflection that you have that before we get started.
Absolutely, Ken. First of all, just devastated. We have a group of people, not all white people, but it comes back to whiteness, who essentially wants to dominate us. And the logical conclusion to domination is eventually extermination. I think from going through all I've been through, I've learned that I need to acknowledge it as clearly as I can see it, so I can begin to try to change it. Mm-hmm. There is a climate now, and there's a window that the white nationalists believe they have. And I think over the next few years, we're going to see these folks try to move on the nation. And it all comes back to whiteness, and how we make sense of what is it, how it enacts behaviors. And then for me, what then is the logical conclusion of it? And for me, the logical conclusion is, if you're not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you aren't going to be here. And so over the next 5 to 10 years, we will make a decision, Ken. Are we going to be a white democracy? Are we going to be a multiracial democracy? Or are we going to divide the country, the racial democracy here, the white democracy here? I'm not sure. But I do know this, it's gone kinetic. We can't say the younger generations are going to make it better. The young man was 18. He was radicalized. And again, the next set of terrorists are on deck now. Mm-hmm. And we've got to engage this thing. or not, or not.
Thanks, John. I hear your words and your affect is palpable. Thank you. Any other thoughts, reflections in the context of why we're here?
I would just say really briefly, you know, I'm both heartbroken and so angry. And, you know, the shooter scoped out sites in Rochester as well. We're about 60 miles away from Buffalo. And three clients who I spoke with today, Black clients from Rochester, all had personal ties to someone who was killed in Tops. And so besides this just having very strong ripples across the country, it actually feels very personal locally, because Buffalo and Rochester are so closely tied. And there's just a lot of pain, a lot of rage, and some of it may not even be in words yet. And the grief is palpable.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mike. Any other thoughts, reflections? And Liang-Ying, I don't want this to get lost in the background, and I don't know if it's hit the news waves in Taiwan, but there's also the Taiwanese community was attacked in California over the weekend as well. And I don't know if that made it, the news made it there, and if you have any thoughts or reflections about that.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, it's not really making it to here in Taiwan yet, not a big news, but in California, I've been watching and searching for all kinds of different discussions. It's really heartbreaking, and I think it just reminds us about the mental health, and then the impact of our identity, right? Not only just racial identity, but within each race, there's a tensions perhaps between ethnicities or among ethnicities, and then also how our identities and our idea of self and our relationships to the larger society is influenced by our family background, and also the construction of our the outside surroundings. So it's a really sad, really sad news for the Taiwanese community. And then but at the same time it brought up a lot of important issues for people to start to talk about for our population. So
okay, thank you.
Ken?
Yep.
I'd like to share my reflections. It's like getting a concussion. My knees were weak. I walk around confused. I was in my clinical supervision this morning and just paying attention to my silence, losing my voice, paying attention to white people more, and the smoldering rage that I feel, and how much more do we have to endure? I thought about when I walk outside my door, will I be able to come back home? Because I do live in a community that supports white supremacy. It supports Trump. And scared, sad, rageful, confused, but not really, because we know how this is designed. And how do I navigate? How do I navigate my team? How do I deal with white people who continue to support those attitudes, values, and beliefs unconsciously or consciously? But just feeling like I'm walking in, like having a big hit in football, having a concussion, and how do I stand up? And then I don't want to carry. I don't want to do that, but I don't want to be shot.
Yeah, it's a dilemma.
And the work that we're doing puts us in a position where we're vulnerable. And I keep praying that it gets better, but I watched some of your stuff over the past couple of days. You've been singing the same song for the past 10, 20 years. And people are still not listening. So those are some of my reflections, man. And
Yeah.
we
Thank
got to
you.
get better.
Thanks. So, like one of the things that was important to me as the editor of this collection was that I really wanted every chapter, every single contribution to provide what I was thinking of would be a cogent analysis and critique of the centrality of whiteness. And in thinking about it that way, one of the things that was certainly uplifted for me was this notion about what is considered knowledge and how do we define knowledge in our society. And certainly I know from my days in the classroom and at universities that there's a very narrow definition of what constitutes knowledge, and that processes like tenure and promotion are predicated on those. And so many of you probably remember getting emails from me, more than one, some of you, encouraging you, because I wanted the approach to the chapters to challenge this notion of what constitutes knowledge, to expand the scope of that. And so many of you remember me asking you to locate yourself within the context of what you were writing. What I wanted to do was to get away from this notion of the objective, stand along the side, neutral scientist who's pontificating undisputable, irrefutable truths, and asking you to sort of put yourselves into the material, and each of you did that. And so the question I wanted to throw out is, now that you've done that and the book is out, what was that like, actually writing about something like whiteness from such a personal standpoint? And I think the challenge for white contributors was, in fact, that most white people don't think critically about whiteness, and when they do, don't locate themselves within it. It's about other. And for people of color, that we as I often think of as a terrorized, traumatized people, don't often feel the freedom to talk about whiteness in an uncensored way. And so that contribution alone to me was like a radical position for the book. And one of the things I'm most proud of with the book is that each of you received that invitation and approach your chapters from that vantage point. And so what I haven't had was the opportunity to check with you. What was that like? What was it like writing about whiteness in such an uncensored way, in a very public way now for, if Deborah and I and the folks in Norton, if we have our way, now for the world to read?
I'll start.
Yeah,
with that because Ken, when you asked me, I said, the centrality of whiteness, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. But as I sat down, and maybe it took me a few days, right? Or for many of us, maybe a couple of months before we could put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. But what it did for me was that I had to open my eyes, and I literally was awakened in a way that I had never been to how white folks have been an integral part of my life in both negative and positive ways. And I have a good friend of mine, she's white, and she always says to me, how do you have these relationships with white people? You know, and writing this chapter made me go back to where and how. And so it makes me want to know more, but it also allowed me to look at these relationships in a much deeper way, in a much more critical way, which meant pushing my own buttons, meaning, what have I been comfortable with?
Mm-hmm.
What have I allowed, and why? And what am I no longer going to allow? So it actually has even brought me further into like my anti-racism work,
Mm-hmm.
and the role that I have as a Black woman, the way in which I'm questioning. And so that's where I am. I'm like literally in a deep questioning, reflection, and acknowledgement. So it blew my mind, actually, what came out. And all the stories that started to come out when you you know, encourage that. And to put it out there means that these very white folks are going to read this, right? And, you know, people that I would call friends, people that I would call, you know, even best friends, mentors, all of that. So I'm happy that I've done it, and it has blown my mind in those ways.
Yeah, and I appreciated that, because I don't know if the other folks of color on the platform agree with this, but I certainly know in many circles there are just like conversations you have among people of color and some you don't have in the presence of white people. And what I appreciated about your chapter was that you had the audacity to discuss publicly a topic that is often discussed privately in circles of color, which has to do with the very complicated relationship that exists between white women and women of color. And I so appreciated you elevating that and using your own personal experiences to help embellish and augment the stories. And so thank you. Anyone else care to say what was it, Mike?
I would like to say something as a white person who was challenged in that way, and also as a white person who was reading both people of color's internal struggles around living in the white gaze and turning the white gaze on themselves, and my own struggle as a person who is white. And I have to say, I felt like it was such an enormous gift to be able to read my colleagues talking from the depth of experience about before they had things at all figured out, including you, Ken. I mean, I met you about 25 years ago, and when I met you, I thought, you know, this is somebody I need to keep knowing, because this is such an incisive understanding. But when reading yours, but also many others of you, including people who aren't in the Zoom, on screen in Zoom, talking about the internalization of racism that happened in order to get through life, in order to get through an academic program, to get through training, and just to get through life. And I've had some of those conversations with people of color on a one-to-one or small group level, but I never felt like it could possibly go as deep as it did being allowed to eavesdrop. And it made me think, Ken, about your, when you talk about the tasks of the subjugated and the privileged, that the tasks of the subjugated are to use their voice, but not to teach or help the privileged person, but to use their voice, to witness themselves. And I really felt that was being embodied in this book. And then the complementary piece is I'm white. So, you know, I had to look at the ways that I unconsciously center whiteness, and the ways I had to think about ways that I've hurt people of color I love very much because of centering whiteness, or sometimes centering my Jewish identity, which is another source of oppression. But it's not as, in this country today, until the white nationalists win, it's not as deep an oppression.
Thanks, Jodie. I really appreciate that. Kim, I'll get you in a second, but I know you had a look of intrigue on your face, and so I wanted to come into your square. You have the right to say, move on, but I was curious if you had a reflection or a thought, reaction.
Yeah, I had a lot as Jodie was talking. I was just thinking about just, you know, like to your question about what was it like, you know, with George Floyd, it did something to me mentally watching a Black man die live, like on video by the cops, and watch him take his last breath, calling for his mom, right? Like it just mentally did something to me, and I just stopped caring. Like I don't care anymore what white people think. I just think about just the mundane things that Black people do, like even with Buffalo, Black people shopping, getting murdered. And it just, Black people going to the store, getting murdered, Black people driving, getting murdered. Like they're gonna kill us anyway. So if I'm gonna die, at least I'm dying telling the truth, right? And that's kind of, because there was this fear writing this chapter. And I was scared because I'm saying some stuff that I would never say to a white person in their face, because you say the minus things, right? It's like we're getting murdered for existing. Like it's not even like when I read the stuff around Buffalo and like this 18-year-old feeling like he's being replaced, like no one's doing anything to white people. Like we're not doing anything to you, we're just here, and just being here makes you want to kill us all in large numbers. Like you're not getting harmed in any way. We're not out there trying to kill you and kill your babies. And, you know, you're doing all of this. And so it just continuously reaffirms my deep-seated belief that white people are the real terrorists. And it's not this small minority called white nationalists. So I think I had a reaction to that. It's like, it's just like, at some point, you're all in the same bucket of like potential killers and murderers. And I'm at a point where I'm just like, whatever. At least I'm dying with a say, and there's a conscious choice there, because we're at risk, we're endangered no matter what. So that's what went through my mind. That's Jodie. I was trying to stay in the conversation, but follow what you were saying, but it was just, I was just going to this other place of like.
No, it's a gift, and I appreciate you sharing it. And your words reminded me of the great philosopher back in maybe the 70s said in a song that we rather die standing on our feet than keep living on our knees.
Anna, thank you. I appreciate what you said.
Yeah. Tim?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I was going to say before really relates, I think, to what you're saying, Anna, because when you asked us to get that real, Ken, it terrified me.
Yeah.
And it terrified me on a couple of levels. One was, am I really going to go public with not just saying, oh, I know I have internalized racism, but here's a really specific story in which I didn't work with a Black therapist because he was Black. Right. And how uncomfortable that makes me, to think that, you know, what Anna's saying is that, you know, I can't say that I'm a world apart from the people that are murdering. Right. I've got the same stuff. And then on this other level, it was terrifying just to have to sit with it, to do the very thing that I was writing about in the chapter. And it continues to, I don't understand how you've been the most powerful therapist in my life without ever being my therapist. But I'm still, like, we finished writing this stuff a year and a half ago or something, and I'm still thick in the growth of like trying to do the stuff that I wrote about be with it and nurture it. It's really uncomfortable. And then I also want to say that, like, it feels worth it because it's the only thing that gives me any kind of hope.
It's, I mean, and I appreciate you saying that here because I know that we went multiple drafts back and forth, and which had nothing to do with your writing proficiency or your ideas, but really trying to almost like a turtle, get to stick its head out of that cloak of white shell that in my estimation so many white people hide behind. And so I appreciate you receiving that invitation earnestly and actually doing it. And that story you tell in the chapter about the Black therapist really resonated with me, because I think for any of us who are not white, we've always known that we probably get a fraction of the referrals that are made to us. I noticed early in my career, whenever I had liberal white friends referring clients to me, the client would always, white client would always come to me knowing I was Black. So it's almost like I had to be forewarned.
Mm.
Those are the kinds of stories that I appreciate the book highlighting, because they're the snapshots of our lives that pierce our souls that white people don't know about. Liang-Ying, your screen lit up on my screen. Were you going to say something or no?
Oh, well, thank you. I was gonna comment a little bit to what Anna shared.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really deeply touched by what she said, and
can you just tell her that?
Yes, Anna, thank you very, very much. And I see so much strength coming from you by saying what you said. And I think that's something that I struggle the most writing the chapter, feeling fear, very, very fearful. And at the same time, going through that process, trying to figure out whether or not what I feel is presentable or going to be valuable for other people. But at the end, I just decide, what the heck, right? Mm-hmm. Whether I said it or not, it is what it is. And if I don't say it, nobody gonna know. And then it's just still gonna be our story. And I thank you so much, Anna, for putting the experience together so beautifully and addressing that. And as you are talking about how you read all those news about the Buffalo shooting, and now thinking back to Ken's earlier question to me, the news about the Taiwanese shooting, how people talk about it, the words people use to describe these kind of event really mean a lot. And then when I think about when people talk about the news for the Taiwanese community, the light was brought in, like all lights were shed to the topic of trauma, the topic of mental health. I mean, yes. Yeah. But for me, you cannot talk about mental health without thinking about what happened for people, and nobody talk about trauma. Nobody talk about what caused, the result. And so as I was talking and listening to Anna, that just really resonated with me, because all mental health, a lot of, ways when we talk about social events, yes, we pay attention to it. We want to work or help different people and populations and sad events. But at the same time, there's still like a sadness and a disappointment to see the lack of depth, how we understand how things happen. Nobody talk about the trauma in the Black community early enough to prevent George Floyd things from happening. Nobody talk about the trauma that the Chinese American went through so that he shoot all these like Taiwanese American in the church. Nobody talk about trauma. Nobody talk about all these like psychological pathways lead people into their action, so-called. And then all we see is the, final result in mental health. So I think, thank you, Anna, for sharing your experience. And I think it's just, I was connecting a lot with what you said. So I just want to, share that with you.
Hinda, were you trying to get in as well?
I thank you, everyone, Liang-Ying and Tim and Anna. I did want to thank you also for speaking the truth, because this book is about being in the presence of the truth that I long for. And I remember you years ago, it was some scene at a culture conference, you were in the center of the group, and I remember you speaking out and speaking the truth. I don't remember the exact setting. And I think it's true that we are potential killers. You don't have to pull the trigger to be a killer. In New Jersey here, Sunabiyada Kohli, a man who's been in prison for 50 years, is finally being let out if the governor lets him out. The Supreme Court voted that. He was in the car. He did not pull the trigger, but he was sentenced to murder. So if I don't look at my whiteness and unpack it, I am complicit, and I am complicit, and I am a party to murder. And what I appreciated about this book, and Ken, I appreciated your gentle nudging me here and there. Is that I had to look at myself, and I was amazed when I deconstructed some of my experiences, even when I was back as a kid, that I was lying to myself, and I didn't know it. Even putting my hand on my chest every day in New York City, pledging liberty and justice for all, which was a lie. And as a kid, I really didn't like being lied to. And as I deconstructed some of the events that I participated in, I was astounded to see how they were organized by the centrality of whiteness, how it was driving my behavior. Even as a kid, I was not a mean kid. I was kind of shy and careful and respectful. But so much of it, so many of my assumptions in the way I interacted with people were guided by the centrality of whiteness and my not seeing my internalization of white supremacy. And I looked at some of how I interacted, and I tell a vignette in the story where I was in a Jewish hotel, and there were two men who were bellhops. And I was a kid, and it was Saturday, and nobody had any activities, and there were two Black men. So I sat around in the lobby with them. Nothing happened on the Sabbath in this Jewish hotel. And they were so lovely to me. They were so lovely. But first of all, I called them by their first names. I know now that I would never address an adult, as a kid, an adult Black man by his first name, unless he was my uncle. I knew him for years. And even then I would call him uncle. But I performed acts of white supremacy without even knowing it, and thinking that I was being very kind and friendly. They were lovely to me, and I imposed on their downtime. I don't know what it looked like to the managers and the owners of the hotel for them to be sitting with a 12-year-old, early pubescent white girl. I don't know if I got them into trouble. They wrote me two beautiful letters at the end when I left. But what I learned through this process was that I had to look at myself through the lens of the internalized white supremacy that was unconsciously perpetrated on me throughout my entire lifetime. And in the end, I also was able not to blame myself, but to understand myself, which really helps me be accountable. Because if I'm not accountable, Anna, then I'm complicit to murder. If I'm not accountable for my whiteness, but also not blaming myself helps me in conversations with other whites who are not seeing their internalized white supremacy. So I thank you, Ken. I think this, and I thank everyone, because this book is being in the presence of the truth about our country.
Thank you. Jeff, let me get you 1 second, please. I just want to pop up to Irene. You have thought, or you like in deep thought?
I'm actually, for some reason, and I am not sure if this is the forum, kind of coming in and out of attachment to the conversation. And I'm having kind of a little bit of a challenge trying to figuring out, I'm actually stuck in my head thinking about what am I going to say if Ken calls on me? and didn't come up with anything.
And then I called on you.
Then you called on me. And so that's where I am right now, just trying to kind of coming in and out of being attached. And if I had to be honest, I'm attaching more to what the folks of color are saying and attaching a little less to the what the white folks are saying. And I'm trying to understand that in my own head. So I'm not sure where to go with it, but that's where I am. And take no appreciation you're asking me, and specifically the email saying you sound like you're talking about someone else. You emailed that to me.
Yeah.
Definitely made it go much deeper and touch places that I hadn't touched in years. So appreciation to you, and honor to be a part of the process.
Thanks, Irene. Jeff?
Writing my piece was really hard because Ken, you were at the center of it to really trigger moving forward. So there was some trepidation around it. But more importantly, I was writing it for a Black audience. This chapter was written for, I see me all too often in a room with 1 or 2 Blacks or people of color and a bunch of white people. And I see the strategies I wrote about play out. And it's heartbreaking, but it's the reality it's the context that we're in. Once you asked me to write about it, I could write about it fairly easily because I had mastered it. Until you held that mirror up to me and made me look at what I was doing. I didn't even know I was doing it. First of all, I didn't know I was doing it. And the sad thing about it, Ken, is what you know, I was rewarded for it.
Right. Well, we always are.
Right. The society rewards us for being the honorary white man. Right. They get rewarded for it. And so what hurt me more than anything was that I was raised by Black parents who put deep in me this Black pride. My grandparents, my parents, they put it deep in me. Yet when I moved into this white world, while it wasn't unraveled, I overlaid it. I made those choices to overlay it until you kind of helped me reckon with myself, and I began to try to take those layers off to get back to that sense of just Black dignity, Black pride. I hope that's what resonates for people, and for Black people, people of color. It's okay to tell white people what you think. They're gonna get mad. We gotta be able to deal with that heat, but it's okay to tell them. I wanna model that. That's what I try to do in every meeting I'm in now, to model it. And Ken, for me, I wanna let them know I'm not angry. Sometimes I let the rage out. It's like today, Ken, people say, well, Jeff, how are you doing? The easiest thing is, oh, I'm okay. But Ken, I'm not okay.
Right.
I'm not okay. So what am I supposed to tell them? I'm not okay. White people are killing Black. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
And I'm going through society. I want to say to everybody, are you upset that 10 Black folks got killed? Are you upset that 13 people in Buffalo did? You know what I mean? I know we got to move on, but it's kind of mind-boggling that there should be outrage about what's going on. And I just don't see it, Ken.
Right.
Lastly, here's where the whiteness is powerful now. It's not about white people pulling triggers or shooting Black people. It's about all those police and law enforcement and the EMT and all the people. When they go home, they're gonna go back to their segregated neighborhoods. Yeah. Listen to me. I talked to my Buffalo students here at Syracuse. They said, Dr. Mangram, that tops in a food desert. Food.
Right.
And insult to injury, the folks can't even get food down of one of the few grocery stores they got in that area because it's a crime scene.
Right.
And so this whiteness is this kind of multi-layered thing, and what we're seeing is the folks who gonna connect. Right. But when the policeman goes home to the white neighborhood, we got to talk about that. Right. And his kids get the good schools, our kids get the subpar schools. We got to talk about that. We got to talk about that. And so we got to talk about it at all these levels because that's what whiteness does. That's what it does. And it can ease white people's pain. Thank God I don't shoot black people. Hence, I'm not a white supremacist.
Right.
And no. When you go to that white neighborhood, you are just collecting on that privilege that history has given you.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff, so much. And just you speaking truth and with passion, because I know that one of the things I try to talk about in that chapter that Jean referenced was this way in which whiteness places a premium on stoicism. And what it does, it strips people of color of all of our joy, of all of our affect, we get told early on, elementary school, turn down the bass, don't be so loud. And so we live these incredibly incongruent lives where our souls are ablaze and we have to sort of wear the mask of a smile and keeping deeply rooted, legitimately felt emotions appropriately tempered to be included. It's an incredibly high price to pay. Incredibly high. But I also think that one of the points I tried to make in that opening chapter was also not just to focus around stoicism, but this piece around individualism that's connected to whiteness. And it's to your point because, and I think this is probably true for many, if not all, people calling the platform. When something happens horrifically, one of the first things I'm thinking is, oh gosh, please don't let it be a Black person. Because I feel spiritually connected to that person. That space between you and me is obliterated. And so I'm always struck by the reaction that white people have when something like this happens. I'm just reiterating the point you made. I'm not that guy. I don't see myself in him. And that's what allows for this perpetuation of whiteness as a prevailing ideology to persist, because what would happen if you did see, as Tim suggested, bits and pieces and particles of yourself in that person that you so readily and so quickly disavow? I think it would be a game changer. I'm very much aware that, Anna, you mentioned when you introduced yourself, your Dominican roots, and Irene, you introduced yourself as Korean American, and Liang-Ying as Taiwanese American. And Ovita, despite my efforts to make you Jamaican, you're Guyanese. And so I wanted to ask, because that all of you have roots, I would think, in countries where there was a kind of racial homogeneity, where you had your roots place you in the context of other people of color, where whiteness wasn't as on full display in your countries of origin, your native countries, as it is here in the US. And so I was curious about how did that, because I think it's a whole different perspective around whiteness, unlike myself, who grew up under the armpits of whiteness my entire life. What was it like to write about whiteness here in this context, but having another cultural context that has helped shape you? And really asking the four of you if you would care to comment, or if you even feel like it's a fair question.
I can start if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just thinking about that, and I write about this in the chapter, is that my relationship with whiteness did not start with me. It started with my family in Korea, my father and his father, and with the white missionaries that would come to Korea to try to convert us us, Christianity from, and not Buddhism, or certainly with the United States coming in to save and liberate Koreans from the Japanese. So definitely the relationship didn't start, but it, in particular, when the US came in, or even when the Russians came in, white meant power.
Mhm. Mhm.
And power meant that you had to do what you could to make sure you weren't harmed by power.
Mhm. Mhm. And I remember you writing about that, and did that bring up some of those old tapes, if you will, old memories when you're writing about that?
Well, I want to say that I had, the interesting thing about this process is that I had memories in my head, but I didn't have affect attached to them.
Mhm.
So I could really compartmentalize. And this is one of the things that I think that I learned and I struggle with, is I can compartmentalize my memory from my affect. So it can be almost like, in what you said, is the story that I'm telling about someone else versus deep-seated feeling and experiences, because that power that came from my past and my ancestry, to me, just continued on through my childhood as a young Korean girl being raised in Minneapolis.
Mhm.
And the power of the white teacher, and the power of the white mentor, or the power of the white doctor, whoever it is, who could use their power in a way to help or hurt. I don't know if that's what you mean, but
Yeah,
that's,
no, it
I
is.
think,
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else like to respond to the question?
I mean,
Ovita?
I really appreciate what Irene just said, because then I don't feel alone
Yeah.
in that, and I'm actually getting emotional, Irene, from what you're saying, because I mean, it was a constant negotiating back and forth, and maybe we didn't quite know it at the time, but to know it now as adults or whatever along the way, that's what we had to do, or that's what we were forced to do. And I do write about my parents came here in the late 60s and left me back home with my grandparents in order to come to the US for a better life and all of this, dreams of what this, the US could be. And when I finally did come, there were very clear messages about how I had to behave and what I had to do in order to make it, because they came here for us to make it. So therefore, making it meant this is a white world and how to be in that white world. However, colorism was embedded in my family, right? And to have light-skinned siblings, or to have that play out in within my own family, conversations around high yellow and being red. I mean, that's so that was embedded. Guyana was colonized. We were just having this conversation, my family and I, on Zoom last night, going through some family history and the realization of the Dutch colonization and the English colonization, and how within my family, my great grandfather, whoever many back, is some Sir Grave, and I'm like, what? So so we, so it's painful. It's really painful to know that how much, that's why the title of this book, how much, even though we're from, I'm from another country, whiteness was there. Whiteness was there. The relationships between Black folks in Guyana and Indian, as in from India, Indian, was a lot of the racial tension. but that's rooted in whiteness.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
rooted in our history of colonization. And then we play it out within our relationships within communities of color, within our own families. You know, and it is painful to realize how much we've perpetuated it. And, you know, one of the things that this pandemic has allowed me and my family to do is to talk about racism. And to be able to be angry with the way in which whiteness has centralized how we have treated each other, parented, and how we're breaking through to a place of being angry, and holding each other in that. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I, you know, check in with Anna and Liang-Ying. I just wanted, this is an intrusive thought I had, which is when I hear the two of you and describe these experiences, and I sort of think about today's world we live in, where there's such incredible concern about little white children feeling uncomfortable in their classrooms because of race. And I often wonder, like, damn, where were all these people when I was in elementary school and kindergarten and middle school, and the kinds of experiences the two of you were talking about? It's hard to be exposed to all of that and not have this, to not be emotional, to not feel some complex combination of despair and red rage, actually. Liang-Ying, did you have a thought, or do you want to comment on this question?
Sure, thank you. I have many thoughts. Thank you both, Irene and Ovita. I was thinking that the one statement, Ovita, you made, saying that you start to learn about whiteness coming to this country. And I think, to me, I examined my experience, my relationship with whiteness, and I realized whiteness is already penetrated in my whole being way longer before I came to the States. And that kind of penetration is so sneaky and so like it's all underlying message. And whiteness, to me, nowadays I look at it, it's not, you know, it doesn't mean color, it doesn't mean race. To me, it is an attitude, right? Mm-hmm. It is a way of living. Mm-hmm. In Taiwan or a lot of Asian countries, I think this is infamous. To many of you might be aware of. People love to use like a whiteness cream. Mm-hmm. The whiter, the better, right? Mm-hmm. When you go to get cosmetic surgery, everybody want to get a double eyelid. Nobody want the Asian eye. Although people will say, oh, Asian women are so beautiful, this and that. But mm-hmm. who truly want to have a plastic surgery and then look like Asian woman? Mm-hmm. I had never heard of it. I'll be amazed if it happens, right? And like, if I were to ask a question, have any of you here recognized the name of Zhen Fan Li? I doubt it. Mm-hmm. But if I said, if any of you recognize the name of Bruce Lee, most of you might recognize that name. And what does that mean? Right? What does that mean? And in the history of, for example, Chinese culture, it's always like the whiter meaning it's a superior, you must from a higher class, right? So yeah, that kind of message already like a long time ago penetrated into my being, and Hollywood movies and all these like Western songs. Western songs means white folks songs. Western meaning white, not like the white, not the West in relation to the East, but white means Western means white. So anyways, that's just what comes to me. And then still to this day, when I talk about that, I feel deeply like I feel a lot of anger, resentment, shame, and just, I don't know how I can be in the world of all these messages and can find my own freedoms without all the conditions already in place. Anyways, yeah, that's what comes to.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Anna, did you want to address the question? Or?
Yeah, I thought it was a great question because I just appreciate just the sensitivity to that, because I do think that, just similar to what Ovita was saying and Liang-Ying, like, and Irene, like, it's the colonization, like, especially in Dominican Republic, Central America, South America, colonization, you know, it has left an imprint there. Like, I talk in the book chapter about how I think it's crazy and frankly a little sick that white people have managed to convince the rest of the world to want to be white, and to want to be lighter. And that's like, to me, I just think, like, if we really are honest with ourselves, like, that's not only crazy, it's sick. It's just, it's highly disturbing. And so like Liang-Ying, what you're saying, you know, you're very beautiful. Like, please don't change that. Like, you don't, nobody, like, the thought of like, and this is why I get so reactive to it, because especially in the Dominican Republic, it was not as in your face as here in the United States. It was kind of more like this subtle, like, desire to be lighter and to straighten your hair and, you know, blue eyes, and comments about that, and hair relaxers, and just sort of marrying lighter. Adelantar la raza, it's a common phrase, right? You need to marry lighter so that your kids are lighter. Like, that's a problem that's still there, and it's a legacy of white people. And so it's easy to look at us like, oh, what's wrong with you guys? You all have this colorism issue. Like, hold up, this is not our issue. And then the other part is, one of the things that I think about often, because like my mom often talks about, like, she's getting older, and which is why I appreciate your chapter, Ken, in the beginning around your dad. And it makes me just think about, because my mom is getting older, and the more she ages, the more she just starts saying things from like her childhood that just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, to be honest, it's just all of a sudden she'll go on this whole narrative. And more recent one was this past weekend where just went on this rant about how hard, I don't know what triggered it, I don't know where it came from, but it was just about there wasn't enough food at some point. And just the dynamics it created among her siblings, and jealousy, and where you go to go eat, and who had food, who got a piece of chicken, who ate the rice plain. And so she was talking about that. And then in a separate conversation, she was talking about what it was like growing, like, again, this is just spontaneous, just struggling here in New York when she came here, and living in other people's houses, and trying to get educated, trying to hold a job, trying to take care of me, and finding babysitters, and doing all of that. And at the end, I asked her, you know, like, well, all of that, just leaving the Dominican Republic, coming here, struggling the way you did, and now here we are, was it worth it? And she really was took aback by that. And she, in Spanish, was just, you know, it beats going hungry every night. And so I thought, well, I feel like that's also created, right? Like, I feel like when you ask the question, Ken, it made me think, some of us come from one of the most beautiful countries of origins on the planet. Like, why would we want to leave that, right? It's only because of the results of colonization and the exploitation of our resources, and putting in their systems that only benefit white people, that then create the disparity and the lack of food. Like, that's what they're trying to leave. It's not that our countries, there's nothing wrong with our countries. Like, if I could live in DR, I would live in DR. Like, why would I be here in the winter? And, you know, like, and that's part of the problem. And so even, which brings it back to this 18-year-old, it's like, You know, it's like, if you're really mad, be mad at that, because this is your people, this is your ancestors. You know, if you're really mad at the diversity of the United States, be mad at how this even came about, because some of us don't even want to be here that much.
Right. And some of us didn't ask to come here.
And exactly, that's the other piece.
Right. Mike, I wanted to ask you, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're holding your heart. Maybe that's just where your hand is right now, but just wanted to check in. I have a question for you, but I wanted to first check in to see what are your thoughts and reflections.
Mostly just affect. I mean, I'm just when it's a person I'm relatively newly working with, a Black woman, and you know, it relates to what Anna was saying. She asked me. We started off talking about recent events in Buffalo, and she just said, "Why do you hate us?" And it was a really helpful question, because it again, I think writing this chapter has been a culmination for me of just locating myself on this continuum. Because one of the things you know, is that like Black life, and I know I don't want to speak, because when I say something like BIPOC, I mean just the diversities within that are too big. I'm just going to, you know, for me, just naming Black life, like it just in most recent events, it only becomes almost valuable and visible upon death.
Right.
And, you know, in Buffalo, like the fact I think somebody mentioned the food desert. Like, food deserts are okay by us, sort of in terms of the white supremacist framework, but the shooter is not, because it almost just makes it so plain. Mm-hmm. But the other stuff. So I mean, I'm sitting with and just really taking in the stories of what everybody shared, especially the devastation that it's wrecked and continues to, even at just the inner levels of censoring. How can I be? What can I say? What tone should I need to use? How can I position my head? What are my nonverbals? Like, it's just, anyway. And then especially being a clinician, you know, like just thinking, why would I think clinical work is anything but colonization? Or an extension of it, because it emerges out of the same frameworks. And so again, this book is just really, that's what I'm saying. It's I just the narratives that people are offering is really such a tremendous gift, because there's a vulnerability that people are offering that I know has helped me tremendously already. And I haven't gotten through most of the book.
Well, I don't know if you haven't have it there with you. Do you?
I don't. That's how prepared I was for today.
Okay,
I left.
no worries. That's really fine.
I have my chapter.
No, that I want to ask. That's fine. And Jodie, I want to come to you, because I think that you and Hinda and a few other contributors who are not on this platform, but certainly an integral part of this project, you know, had the unenviable task, I think, of tackling the topic of whiteness, which is through your privileged identity, while living intimately with your subjugated identities as Jews, and having to compartmentalize that, with me insisting that you do that. And so I recognize, on the one hand, that was in no way a small feat to do that level of compartmentalization, but yet I felt like both of you walked that thin line. And the request was, can you elevate whiteness and disentangle it from your Jewishness, which I think is a very complex thing to do. But as you alluded to earlier, Jodie, you did, that sometimes that the infusion of one's subjugated identity, be it Jewish or white woman, often has a way of sidetracking, usurping conversations about race. And so you wrote beautifully about that, Jodie, and I'll just say here publicly, you and I had many back and forth as colleagues and beloved friends. I mean, And so I just want to get the two of you to sort of comment on what that was like. And then also having a Black editor like me nudging that along and saying, no, but I want you to keep it focused on race, keep it focused on your whiteness. So
I really appreciate that question. Two quick things before I try to take that on. And one is, I just was so appreciative of what Mike was just saying. And I'm realizing this was exactly, I think, what you're asking me about, because my my privileged self was able to, and Jeffrey talked about this as well, my white privilege was able to intellectually distinguish between white nationalist killers and those of us white people who stand by as people of color are killed in less visible ways, like by diabetes and by heart disease because of things like food deserts, and because a Black person is sent away from the hospital when they've got COVID symptoms because it's not that bad, and then they go home and they die. And so I just want to acknowledge that and let you know, Anna, that I've been really working on metabolizing what you said, and how much I realized I made a very careless distinction, which I so appreciate being challenged on, because that is my privilege, that I can do that. So thank you, Anna, for that. It was very hard to hold that dual reality, because I have all this historical trauma. You know, I have many relatives who were murdered. This is in my chapter. They were massacred in Ukraine, of all places, not by Russians, but by Ukrainians. And because Jews in Europe weren't Europeans, so it can be sometimes very hard to identify as white, but I know I have white privilege. I walk with white privilege. I live my life with white privilege, but I can forget that. I think all white people can forget that, but I think it's especially easy to lose track of that when you have a subjugated identity that has historically gotten people killed and still does. You know, the Tree of Life synagogue shooting happened for very similar reasons. And you know, Ken, that some of the back and forth we had was about my associating white supremacy of all brands, not just the extreme kind, but of like the white supremacy that I can fall into and do with Christian supremacy. And I see them as historically linked. So that gets me really confused. But what I have to keep struggling with, and your editing was brilliant on that, because you really kept holding my feet to the fire in a way that made me go much deeper. I'm sure there's deeper to go, about how just easy it is to feel terrified sometimes as a Jew. But then I'm also terrified because I have children of color. And right now that scares me a lot more than the fear I have as a Jew. Although I'll admit that I haven't been in a synagogue for 2.5 years, thank you, COVID. But before that, I was often very afraid to go in at the high holidays. So there's going to be a shooting. But I don't live with it the same way that people of color live with it, and I know that. Right. So I just have to learn from people of color who are generous and kind enough to let me in a little bit on their experience. I love that I got to read a chapter that was written by a Black man for Black people and that I was allowed to read it. That was such a gift. And I think that happened for many of you. So I just want to say it's been an incredibly challenging, hard, painful, sometimes scary, growthful experience. And I always had Ken Hardy sitting on my shoulder going, but, and that really, and not even when you said things, but when I was writing, there was Ken going, but, or there were my friends in the Boston Institute for Culturally Affirming Practices who were going, but, and I writing the chapter was a gift. I feel like reading the other chapters is a bigger gift.
Yeah. Well, I appreciated immensely you staying in that conversation with me and all the, the back and forth we did. And I certainly learned a lot from that process. And I said to you from the very beginning that I knew from day one that that was the chapter I wanted you to write. And so grateful that you did.
And my only challenge is that I didn't grow up in Brooklyn. My father did. I lived in Brooklyn as an adult, but I didn't grow up there.
Right. Hinda, did you want anything you want to add, Hinda, before it moves
Yeah,
on?
well, I have the Brooklyn piece. At any rate, Jodie's chapter, which I looked at because it was relevant to mine, it is really gives so much more historical context. And what I wrote really had to deal with the immediacy of my life throughout the whole chapter, although Jodie has personal pieces. And, the Torah says, love thy neighbor as thyself. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Rabbi Hillel, the elder, was asked, what is it about? Love thy neighbor as thyself. All the rest is commentary. But do we truly love our neighbor as ourselves? And I grew up seeing a lot of hypocrisy among Jews. And as I wrote this chapter, first of all, I was very conflicted because I felt I was dishonoring my parents, which is against my tradition. But I had to speak the truth. I had to speak about the word that my father used to refer to Black people. I had to use it.
Yeah.
And I saw it as part of his depression, as part of him seeing himself as unsuccessful in the context of the larger family, working class person, a man who had could not save his firstborn child who died at the age of 8, and also who was probably threatened by the execution of the Rosenbergs, which reminded us, be careful, Jews, because if you step out of line, we're going to put you in the electric chair. So I felt that I was being disloyal to my people, that I was, I'm terribly conflicted about Israel, the atrocities committed against the Palestinian people. And what happened at that funeral of the journalist. We're supposed to be better. We're supposed to be better. We should know better. We suffered in the Holocaust and for thousands of years before that in Babylonia, in Egypt, wherever. We should know better. So I have to speak the truth to my people. I have to say that I am a Jew, and I am a Jew who will work on my anti-racism, because that's part of what I think of as the teachings. But it's I feel that people who will read it will probably be offended. Jews who will read it may be offended. I worry about that, but I had to write it that way.
This Jew appreciated it, Hinda. And I had the same kind of struggle as you did around not my parents, but I was thinking about my great-grandmother's family that was wiped out long before the Holocaust in a pogrom, 1912. And I don't want to dishonor them. They matter to me, but I don't think I am dishonoring them by trying to be in solidarity with other people who are currently being oppressed in this country the way they were in Ukraine, which was then Russia, which is maybe about to be again. I hope not.
And thank you for just acknowledging it publicly here, because I did know every step along the way that was really, really extraordinarily difficult for you. And in our exchanges, I kept, realized I was flirting with pushing you across the line. But I think your chapter is a powerful chapter. And I'm really glad it's out there. And I'm hoping that the compilation of all these chapters will spearhead a new kind of dialogue and conversation among us all. I mean, that's what I'm really hoping for, because I think all of you took, just extraordinary risk and putting things out there. And Gina, I wanted to ask you, your chapter, Black Man Drowning in a Sea of White Supremacy. What was that like pulling that together? And and just to go backwards a little bit, I happen to know that you were writing at right at the time we're in the midst of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and as a piece of context. And so what was it like? And was it like reading it once you got the book and seeing it again?
I think, thanks, Ken. Writing it was was an eye-opening experience. I think, like Ovita said, I don't know if she said it this way, Ovita, but I know you were talking about, when you were talking, it resonated with me that I'm not alone. In some ways, when I was writing it, Ken, I felt like a betrayal to my own people in the midst of George Floyd, in the midst of Aubrey, in the midst of going to support. I think that time we were protesting around the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond, Virginia. And we were bringing a team of people down there as I was working on that chapter. And it was just, I think you talked about the dichotomous, dualistic thinking that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And just me walking in both worlds. And sometimes I get flooded, because a lot comes to me. But it was one of the biggest pieces when we were going back and forth. I really wanted to make sure people knew I wasn't white. I wanted everybody to know I never wanted to be white, don't want to be white. But God dang it, I was raised white. And assimilation was our path to prosperity and success. But what cost? And then thinking about, after it was out, I was pleased, but then the fear of the betrayal, and me speaking the truth around how whiteness had drowned me. And it was hard just coming back to me. But like I think Tim says, you've been my therapist, you've been out being my therapist. And I remember in 2016, you helped me breathe. You helped me breathe. You helped me stop drinking that seawater I was doing my whole clinical career. I've been mentored by white women. I've been mentored by white men. I was part of corrections. I was part of the school to prison pipeline. I was locking up Black kids. I was holding them for 2 years at a time sometimes, based on those white supremacist teachings. And writing those stories that I never talked about with people, in some ways was very healing. And it's allowing me to step into who I am and not feel the shame. because you hide it when you assimilate. You hide it in order to move in both worlds. Because I had to move my Black people, and I was always dealing and living with white people. So the psychological homelessness that I endured was part of that chapter. And reading it now is liberating in some ways, and I want to say more. I don't want to stop. And I worry about my hometown, Oberlin, all my white friends and Black friends, because we grew up thinking we was all good. But then, like you talk about, that covenant was strong. We just didn't know we were walking in it. And I hope that it helps enlighten some of my peers, my colleagues. I know it's helped my family tremendously. So it was a definite struggle, but a joy all at the same time. And I pray it helps other people who are walking in the same or swimming in the same sea that I am.
And I was curious about, and like, what emotion has all this conversation here today generated for you?
Yeah, sad. I'm sad. I'm sad. I am truly and authentically sad.
Yeah.
Honored to walk with these folks. I'm honored to walk with all of you. But God dang, man, I am sad.
Mm-hmm.
I am tired. And I'm not sure why it's taking so damn long to figure out humanity. Yeah, it's a lot of sadness. And when I see Anna, because I met Anna when Anna was crying on stage in Stamford, Connecticut. Yeah, I remember your words, and I remember the power that happened in that room that weekend, and the pain that we were all enduring, that you endured. And just sad. And I think that was 2019 or a couple of years ago, but it feels like it was yesterday. Just honored and sad all at the same time.
Excellent. And it was interesting. I think like the day the advanced copies went out, and I think I must have been the last person to get my copies. This is a slight aside. And so I appreciated all the love that you all sent in emails. And it wasn't just, oh, I got my book, that's great. Like, I actually thought about reading all of them here for this roundtable because they were that moving for me. And Keith Alford, who is from Buffalo and was a part of, but can't be today, texted me and said, Keith is Black man. See if I have it. He said, I can't find the words to express what I felt when I opened a book and saw 2 chapters back to back by Black men. It shouldn't be that much of an aberration. But he was deeply moved by that. And so before I come to you, Tim, I just wanted to ask Jane, you and Jeff, just from that perspective as Black men, what was it like for you? Getting your word out there, and you had no way of knowing whether you were standing as alone at all, but I was just curious, just wanted to check in to see what that was like for you, each of you, just briefly, if you don't mind.
For me, Ken, I'm just so happy you pushed me to go ahead and do it, because everything in me said no. Everything in me said, it's not gonna get you anything, Jeff, but more things. I'm just being honest. But you pushed me to go ahead and write it. And as you know, I had a friend who had just passed away. And I was dealing with that grief as I wrote it. And again, Ken, it was important. Yeah, it's important for my children to read what I went through. They saw it, but they didn't know what I went through. And Ken, you got to hear me now. The transformation fundamentally changed my family. When I began engaging with me, first of all, and then whiteness. And so, yeah, it's one of the better things I've written in the sense that it's about me modeling for my children how they're going to have to navigate it, and don't lose some of that Black pride and dignity we put in you. You may lose it, but it's there. Come back to it. Back to it. And don't be afraid. It's okay. Well, let me change that. You can function scared, and it's okay and to do so. Right.
Thank you.
I think for me, and I appreciate you, Jeff. I appreciate your affect. I appreciate your energy. I appreciate your words from one brother to another. I really appreciate it. It's a definite honor. You pushed me, and my thing was about just fear of not being good enough. Walking into psychological homelessness, you never know if you're good enough by white folks or Black folks. So I appreciate you pushing me to do that, and just to be one of few Black men to put pen to paper and to share with the world my story and my thoughts and my reflections. Just extremely grateful, and yeah, I think that's all I can say.
Okay. Thanks, Gene. Thanks, John. And Tim, I wanted to come to you and ask, you know, that there were two themes from your chapter that were quite resonant for me. And one was your discussion of the sort of white domination disorder and your plea for self-love and love. And at first glance, I wouldn't imagine that neither one of those would be topics that the quintessential hetero cisgender white man would be talking about. And so what was the impetus? What inspired you to take that angle?
My brain just went in two different directions about how to answer it because I feel it's complex. What inspired me to take that angle? I kind of like to speak to it in the here and now, as well as what inspired me originally.
Okay.
Because I think it's an ongoing thing, right? Like right now, when I'm sitting within this meeting, you compared me to a turtle. It hurt my feelings a little bit because I looked at myself on the Zoom and I looked at the turtle too. But what like I feel like there's something really real about that. In all of these conversations I do with you, going back to Syracuse, I think one of the things that I've been sensing more and more as time goes on is, I don't know the best way to say this. I'll probably regret the way it comes out. But like Irene said something earlier about like how hard it was to tune into the white people versus the people of color. And I don't think that that's just coincidence or something. There is a deadness in whiteness. I really believe that in order to maintain the stance of domination and control, we suppress and kill our own humanity. And I'm so hungry to be alive, to have my whole soul. What originally inspired me to do that was after all these years of working with you and going to race workshops and learning about privilege, I had not realized, despite how many times and how effective of a mentor and facilitator you are, but I had not realized how much my efforts to change, transform, and heal were exercises of domination and control over myself. that just because I got an idea that I could just will change. Just, oh, I understand it. So that's how I am now. And then act in ways that would require, try to force other people to see me as I saw my preferred self. And so what sparked it for me was going to a therapist, different therapist than the one I mentioned before, going to a therapist that started helping me heal from childhood trauma. And I couldn't just will that change. I couldn't just say, oh, I get it. This is what I'm supposed to be now. She was really affected me of calling me on the BS. And so as I really started to like confront this internal sense of shame and all the self-hatred and insecurity and inferiority in myself, I was like, oh, this actually is how people heal. And this is not how I go about trying to transform myself in terms of being white. Why not? Because I don't want to sit with the shame, the horror, the reality of my own racism, you know, my own internalized inferiority and brokenness that makes me cling to racial superiority. So that's kind of where I was coming from in it. I wrote a little bit about that in the chapter. And I just am trying to go about this work in a way that doesn't force more control on myself, like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to act now, this is what I should do, but really get real about what's in there and what needs to transform, and trying to find ways to support that other people too.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that very thoughtful answer. Emma, I wanted to check in with you very quickly to see if there are any questions that's come up offline that we could answer before we run out of time. And there may not be, but I just wanted to check any event that there may have been.
Hi, yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but thank you for checking in.
Absolutely. So we have about 7 or so minutes left, and so I just wanted to give everyone a final comment. So ask you to be concise if that's possible. Just if you only know the chapter that you've written because you haven't had a chance to read the book at this point, just based on what you've written, what would be your encouragement to folks who are listening about why you would want them to take a look at your chapter? Mike, why would you want someone to take a look at your chapter?
It's a great question. I'm not a great salesperson. In the sense of like saying, I think for me, it's an unpacking. I don't know how beneficial it is for people of color to read it, but at least for white people to read it. For me, it outlines the many ways that I've come to realize how much is just baked in to what I do, who I am, and how I move through the world, and the process that goes into just trying to both understand, unpack, and change. Literally trying to change how I vibrate in the world and move through the world. And I think it's people can replicate it in their own ways.
Thank you. And Liang-Ying?
I'm not sure if I'm addressing to your questions for us, but I'm just thinking, as a family therapist, we learn about system theory and what promote change is that secondary change, right? Mm-hmm. Second level of change. And I'm thinking this book to me is that process for myself. And I think the final result, the collection of the book, I hope present the opportunity to not only the mental health field, but to the larger society as a change agent. Because I think writing this chapter for each one of us is a really life-changing or eye-opening experience. And I hope reading this book will also be a life-changing and eye-opening experience. And I wrote in my chapter, the final words is a quotation from Alice Walker. And she said, "Keep in mind always, the present you are constructing, it should be the future you want." So I just want to leave it as that.
Thank you. Thank you. And Anna?
I just wanted to, I guess sorry, can you ask the question again? Why my chapter? Why people should read my chapter?
Yeah.
So, I think my chapter really, from my perspective, especially as under the umbrella of Latino, Latinx community, what it means to be Black, and really what liberation looks like, just a glimpse of what, at least from my experience, how we're trying to free ourselves from this and what it looks like. And to really give people a chance to connect to the ongoing struggle of liberation and to not judge Black people so harshly in the ways that they're trying to liberate themselves.
Okay. Thank you. Ovita?
So I think I love this because this book is for everybody, everyone. But what I think reading your chapter and like what you, part of why you wanted this to write this and to put this together is to end racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the only people that can do that are white folks.
Mm-hmm.
There's work for us to do as people of color, clearly, a lot of work for us to do. But I'll read what I think this would be about, or what it was about for me. I'm left with an urgency to be my authentic self, to be vocal, to hold white people accountable for understanding how the devastation of their unspoken and sometimes subtle messages preserve racial inequities. And that's what we were talking about today. It's not the extremity, it's like the day-to-day stuff that you don't even know. Mm-hmm. If this book would just be able to help people, white folks, understand, like, it's just you sitting down. It's just you opening your mouth. It's just you know, showing up in the way that you do. That's problematic and perpetuates the centrality of whiteness.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Hinda, was there a line or two that you have?
I'm also relating back to what you say in your chapter, that if we don't racialize whiteness, that we're complicit in contributing to oppression. Mm-hmm. And, you know, but in my chapter, I hope to exemplify a journey where I look at what I did wrong, what I learned from my mistakes, what I continue to learn from, and also hopefully to invite a community of white people who are willing to look at ourselves. And I end up with a section saying staying in the fight as white, and I outline a few things for people to do. I won't read all of them, but I do say, expect mistakes. Discomfort is in the cards. It's infinitesimal compared to oppression. And also, we are not to blame. See, this is what happens. Many white people feel defensive, as though when we point this out, but we're not to blame for internalizing white supremacy, but we are accountable.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping to invite and learn also myself to invite a community of white people, a larger community of white people who are willing to look at how we are inadvertently, unconsciously complicit in white supremacy. If you don't have to have a hood or a hood, or carry a rifle or be the, as Anna says, be the shooter to be a killer.
Thank you. Irene?
I struggle with this question a bit because I thought of all the great things that people have written. I want to say the only thing I can say about my chapter is I think people should read it because it's my truth. And I think that's what's going to liberate us, is just being able to speak our truth and have people hear it and understand it.
You know, I didn't get a chance to check with you beforehand because I was so deeply touched by your email regarding your father. And I thought he had the most brilliant answer to all of this. And do you remember it well enough to share it?
I have to read it, but I can tell you he's 95 years old.
If you want to find it, I'll go to Jeff and come back to you. And we'll try to, we'll just, folks, we're going to go over 2 minutes if that's okay with everybody. Jeff?
For me, Ken, I want people to see growth, and that growth is going to be an inside out work. And so the line that I want to read is just two sentences. I had to have a reckoning with myself, and I did.
Great. That's wonderful. Yeah. And Irene, did you find it?
One more second, I'll find it.
Ken, one more thing while she's finding it. Another thing I hope people get, you did one simple thing. You just gave me feedback. That's all you did. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I remember I could have yelled, screamed, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I heard the feedback and it was so jarring that I didn't know what to do with it, but it caused a reckoning. Right. Instead of being defensive, maybe people need to be more open to feedback and then try to make some sense of this person's trying, they held a mirror up, they see something, they're telling me something, maybe I need to do some work to figure out what they're seeing that I'm not seeing. Yep.
Thank you. Yep. So Irene.
Okay, yes. So let's see, I gave one of my advance copies to my 95-year-old father. Okay. He has since told me that he believes knowledge will not rid this world of racism, that what is needed are changes in each individual's feelings about each other. The stories in the book are touching, interesting perspectives from someone who, this is an interesting perspective from someone who rarely showed his feelings to me growing up.
And so I wanted to leave us on that note. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to hear from everyone. Deborah, Kevin, Emma, folks from Norton, thank you so very much. And you have given my mother the most cherished birthday gift on this day, her 89th birthday. The universe took care of this for us. And so I'm happy that she's had a chance to see this come to fruition and on her birthday nonetheless. And we didn't plan it this way, it just happened. Deborah, I'll toss it back over to you. And thank you all very much for doing this. And thanks for everyone who joined in for this conversation.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Ken, and every single contributor who is on this call and shared of themselves in writing and in speech, and of course, all the people who contributed in writing to the book as well. It was truly a collective effort, and hearing the way that people have spoken about the feedback that Ken gave and seeing him moderate this, one can see he's a natural editor, and I think we can all agree to that. And as an editor myself, it's such a gift to work with somebody like that. And by extension to all of you, I learned an amazing amount about myself in reading this book, and in publishing this book. We are truly honored to be able to do that and to bring your voices to other people as much as we possibly can. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.